So, good morning, everybody. This is Adam Greenfader. I'm the author of Why Puerto Rico Now, and I'm just honored today to be with Patricia Carrero, who is one of the rising stars in Puerto Rico, Puerto Rico born and raised native. And I just kind of wanted to chat with you, Patricia, this morning. I know that you have read Why Puerto Rico Now. Good morning.
Good morning, Adam. Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here and to represent the Puerto Rican youth that is trying to stay here and is trying to do something. I think there's this notion that people have given up on the island, and I personally know so much Puerto Rican youth that is really hands-on, trying to build this country back up, and people that are coming back too, which is really exciting. People from the diaspora that are relocating and bringing all that knowledge here.
Sweet, sweet. So tell us just a little bit about kind of your story. You grew up in Puerto Rico, and kind of what have you been doing and where are you at right
Yeah, I think that when you grow up in Puerto Rico and you're a Puerto Rican, you are presented with an undeniable choice of will you live here? Will you live somewhere else? Will you give up? Will you fight? Because it is a daily fight. It is a daily choice to be here, especially for those of us who have that opportunity also of leaving. And so ever since I was really small, I just have this like fire inside of me for Puerto Rico. I cannot extinguish it. We all know it. We're in the baseball series right now. It's like if you want to know what it is to be Puerto Rican, go watch a baseball game, you know? And so it's that love for my country that really like pushes me so that everything that I do has a why, and that why is Puerto Rico. So how can I give other people the opportunities that were given to me? How
now?
can I employ all of the skills and knowledge that I've obtained from school and from the University of Puerto Rico to better the island, to protect ourselves from future disasters, and to learn from our mistakes? So I think your book was really good on that too, because it gave a really good historical background. And I'm huge on history. I did economic history last semester, and a lot of us don't know our history, and so sometimes that can lend itself to a lot of pessimism or lack of hope. And I think that we have a lot of hopeful stories in our past, and that's only indicative of what we could do in the future.
Mm. So you said a few things there, that maybe for people that are not familiar, you said like challenges of living in Puerto Rico and staying in Puerto Rico. Like, what's that all about? What kind of challenges does a typical young Puerto Rican face?
Well, it's interesting because there seems to be, at least in my experience, a contrast between the heard and the lived. So there is this constant buzzing of there's no jobs, people are leaving, there's going to be a revolt, or like the reform for employment is unfair, and then people are taking over, gentrification. So there seems to be all of this conversation over on this side that is predominantly negative. And then there is also the lived experience. So there is the lived experience of the day to day with like the power outages and the difficult in transportation. Like I don't have a car, so I take the bus and the train every day. And so that can be challenging, you know. Sometimes I can be waiting like 40 minutes for a bus. This is true, you know, but there's also like a huge upside in the day to day life. And it's just there's something about this island that is charming. There's something about it that even in the chaos, we're celebrating.
You mentioned that you love history, and that in Why Puerto Rico Now, I wanted to take the time to kind of lay out some of those historical, uh, you know, economic precedences and kind of the reasons why things are the way they are today. Was there anything that stood out in your mind about the history of Puerto Rico that maybe you hadn't been aware of or wasn't top of mind?
So something extremely unexpected was, and correct me if I'm wrong, the first shot in World War I or World War II? Was World War I? The first shot fired in World War I was in Puerto Rico. So that seems like the kind of fun tidbit, the historical tidbit that I'd pocket and kind of share that with other people. So I really like that. But like within the larger scope, you did a really good job of illustrating how basically how we ended up at this debt crisis. And it's really important to have that reflection.
Mm.
And it's really important to have that reflection historically, not just within the last 4 years, 5 years, 10 years, because what it does is it unveils a pattern of behavior that we just want to change. Basically, there was an economic model that collapsed. The last time we actually implemented a plan for Puerto Rico's development was 1934, basically, with El Plan Chaldón and then Manos a la Obra. So Operation Bootstrap, it showed miraculous results. I mean, we're talking levels of development that were impossible to negate. People that moved from slums and no shoes to living in a city and shopping around in Rio Piedras. And so it was a generational change. Imagine that. I mean, that gives me a lot of hope, because I think, imagine me growing up in this Puerto Rico. It was already done in the past. It can be done again. The thing is, because I was such a success story, we kind of stayed on that path. And when the economy started changing, as it does, and the world started changing, and then Puerto Rico was not able to adapt. It went through a deindustrialization phase. And to make up for that, there was no other plan established. There was no proyecto de país, no country project to kind of move Puerto Rico into this new globalized environment. And so in order to keep up with expenses, basically, we just started borrowing and borrowing and borrowing and borrowing and borrowing and borrowing. And borrowing was a short-term solution to a long-term problem. And so this just spiraled out of control, and now we're paying the consequences of that. The problem, failed economic model. Okay, then what could we do? A new economic model. And I think your book is really good on that too, because it kind of gives you the elements of what could be a new economic model, how the future is looking, so that we can position ourselves correctly, and not in a vague way, because you did a really good analysis of why, literally the title of the book, why Puerto Rico. So why Puerto Rico is really well suited for the challenges that are coming in the near future.
But in writing the book, I really wanted to look forwards. So the idea is not so much to kind of look at the past and criticize it, but was to kind of figure out new ideas and new ways of thinking about things. And really kind of speaking to people like you who have the time and the desire to kind of make, Puerto Rico a better place.
I think you achieved that. And I was looking at the images and the way that the text is so the chapter summaries, like the way it's all organized. What I like too is it made it accessible. This is a book that I'm definitely going to keep around and kind of revisit as I go on in this journey of wherever this takes me, because I can't read this book and not do anything about it.
For those that haven't been following, Puerto Rico has been and will be the recipient of over $80 billion of federal relief and rebuilding funds, of which a lot of that is going to go to electrical grids, going to go be rebuilding redundant energy. Puerto Rico has, by 2050, a 100% green energy goal. How important is the environment for kind of young Puerto Ricans today? I mean, is that a big issue? Is that something that people are concerned about?
I can speak from academia, because I'm in the university right now, and that is a trending topic. I mean, that is the predominant discourse, at least at the academic level. Environment, preparing for disasters.
That's going to be huge, because right now Puerto Rico imports 90% of all its energy, and it's really dirty energy. So that was kind of, for me, the big shocker. When I hear about people saying, well, the Jones Act, we need to eliminate the Jones Act. And if you just think about it, the Jones Act is really kind of a result of us having to import things that maybe today we can do on our own. Like, what do you think about that?
I'm so glad you brought that up, because that was another thing that blew my mind when you mentioned it. And I like the way that you go about the problem, because sometimes we can get so caught up on like the surface level, but when you dig deeper, there is a way around it, right? There is kind of like a loophole. There's actually an opportunity within the problem for us to position ourselves better in the long run, and that was through renewable energy. If we stop importing so much petroleum energy, there's a huge energy crisis right now. Energy costs are through the roof. There's issues with Luma, the electric company, and no one is talking about this. Nobody is talking about the fact that we can stop importing so much petroleum, that we import like 95% of our energy, that is dirty energy, especially if we're talking about sustainability. And we live in a Caribbean country where the sun is shining all the time. We have a huge opportunity to harvest that sun.
Price of green energy has really come down. It used to be kind of when you would calculate, is it worth it for me to put some solar panels on my house? Um, Most people would calculate about it takes 7 to 10 years before you start seeing profits or at least getting repaid. Today, that number has come down dramatically. Most really smart people will say it's about 4 years now from the time you make the investment, buy those solar panels, maybe a battery, by the time that you can actually get your money back. And so for most business ventures, 4 years is a really small period of time, especially imagining that your solar panels could last up to 20 years, right? So that means like 16 years of free energy or really reduced energy costs. It's a no-brainer. So that would kind of be my message, is just have people look again and say, hey, is it worth it for me to get 16 years of kind of free energy or reduced energy costs, with making this investment? And so that would be kind of the first thing. And then the other thing is like, what's the cost of us not doing anything? What's the cost to our environment and to our people and the people's health if we don't do anything? And like, is the status quo okay?
And I think we've been forced to ask ourselves that question after a hurricane, because when it comes time to rebuild, what do you want to rebuild? Do you want to rebuild what you had that didn't work? And so we're in a particular situation that differs from other countries, because after a disaster, you have to ask yourself these questions. You have to do a historical analysis, and you have to make an intentional choice about the direction that you want to move in. And I think, like, as we're speaking now, what the Puerto Rican youth is so key for is using that voice, making that choice. So I'm really excited. I'm looking forward to looking back at this conversation in 10 years and saying, wow, how things have changed. Because I think the pace at which this can develop can surprise all of us.
And so when you look at Puerto Rico's kind of infrastructure, its 5G infrastructure and all its capacity already with the technology it has, Puerto Rico has just a great basis to grow its technology. I mean, a lot of people don't realize that Puerto Rico has one of the most sophisticated internet systems in the world, in the Caribbean. And so we started to look a lot at kind of blockchain and the capacity to use blockchain for new developments and new inventions. So for me, kind of one of the most exciting things is kind of looking at that space. And I know that you've been living in Puerto Rico throughout the last couple of years, where you're seeing all these new technology people come to the island. I mean, kind of what's it like for you to be communicating with them and seeing kind of where they're at?
Yeah, I was around 18 years old when I had my first encounters in Old San Juan with this crypto like world. And so they're very avant-garde ideas, which at the time were very complex for me to understand. I just pretended that I knew what they were talking about. I was like, yes, 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 of course, blockchain. And to see, as we were talking before about the speed, to see the speed at which this has grown and developed in a matter of years, how this is now mainstream, and how these technologies are evolving. It's fascinating to know that I got a sneak peek of that, not at Silicon Valley, in Old San Juan. And so, and you mentioned it, that we are in this unique position. So we tend to think about resources, right? Like economic, financial resources, like natural resources. Intellectual resources in Puerto Rico are prime. I mean, the conversations I've overheard are impressive. There are so many people coming here with the mentality of being a part of the future, of making a positive change, of incorporating these new technologies, of developing new ways of thinking. And what better place to do that than here, where all the old ways of thinking have failed? I told you this before. One of the key words that you used was, we have an opportunity to leapfrog. So there's a challenge, and yet there is a silver lining where we could jump over that challenge and arrive at an even better destination. So the energy grid is in shambles, leapfrogging to decentralized solar systems. So we're having issues right now with funding, opportunity to create a supranational economy that incorporates the diaspora. People are moving out of Puerto Rico. Again, opportunity to incorporate them into our economy via all of these new technologies. And so that's so exciting. That it gets me so fired up to think about how all of these things that are being talked about as issues can actually be opportunities for us to leapfrog.
And just imagine what the world would look like when your population triples simply because of the use of the technology. I mean, it's pretty amazing and crazy to think about.
Countries, but most Puerto Ricans that I know, they're dying to come back. Like they have a love for their country. Their idea was to kind of go prosper and eventually move back, build their families here, help the country. And when I was outside, I found that there was a gap. It was lacking in opportunities for me to engage with my country while I was away. And I had this super strong desire to be here, to bring back knowledge, resources, everything. I wanted to give everything to my country because I love my country. And so that's a great opportunity that we have. And it gets me so excited to think about it too, because I know there are so many people, like so many Puerto Ricans out there that would jump at the opportunity of participating in like a supranational economy.
In my book, Why Puerto Rico Now, I talk about Project Serenity. Project Serenity, which was this kind of very unknown project that went along with Operation Bootstrap, but was meant to keep and support and even build on Puerto Rico's culture. And so Luis Munoz Marin and President Kennedy at the time said, look, if we are going to have Puerto Rico go through this great economic growth, we need to make sure that the culture stays strong. And so they created the Institute of Culture, and they created all these other establishments, museums that would go to each little town and provide books, women's rights. So there was a lot of effort that was done in the 50s and 60s and 70s to create this amazing Puerto Rican culture. And the manifestation of that today is just obvious. I mean, Blockbuster, most YouTube video visits. I mean, the stars just keep coming on and on. And kind of what I see and why Puerto Rico Now is, how do we use, you know, this already very powerful kind of world impacting artistic talent? You know, how do we move that over to the financial? How do we, you know, how do we use that same kind of talent that we have and create blockbuster systems that can, you know, dominate worldwide? And that's kind of was part of what I wanted to talk about in the book, was, you know, using Puerto Rico's already mega you know, infrastructure for stardom in other areas. And kind of like you were saying, don't get me started on that. I think I might have hit a chord with you, Patricia.
Is like, this is so impressive, you know, that you can go to any corner of the world and you'll listen to an artist from Puerto Rico. I mean, that the impact of that is just, it's always very exciting. And I'm very proud of our cultural creation. Like we have hit after hit after hit after hit, musical genres. We've made entire musical genres. Like that is crazy to me, and it cannot be understated. And not only that, but the money that moves. And so I'm really passionate about developing an in-house music industry, because a lot of the artists, they go to Miami, and so they'll have like their bank accounts over at Miami, they'll have their studios in Miami, they'll do their videos in Miami, and so they'll move a lot of money, but it won't necessarily be in Puerto Rico. And so I'm interested in how we can approach these cultural creations, not just from the perspective of culture, right? Like nationalism, awesome, we're doing all these things, Puerto Rico, like Bad Bunny is in Russia, but how can we approach it from an economic point of view? So how can we bring these people here? How can we bring that capital here? We were talking about access to capital. How can we get these musical geniuses to establish funds to kind of feed back into the community, to generate other artists, to give other kids the opportunities that they wish they had? It's just about everybody, all hands on deck. What are you in the music industry? You can help the country. What are you in the biotech industry? You can help the country. What are you working for NASA? in whatever state, you can help the country. So it's just everybody kind of getting involved, and there's such a richness, a vitality, a sazon, like a flavor. I think like the music of Puerto Rico is just it's such a representation of who we are as a country.
In
And
Why Puerto Rico Now, I talk a lot about repopulating paradise. And I think a lot of people have kind of top of mind is how do we keep our young people in Puerto Rico? How do we keep people who have, learned a few years, been out in the United States or Europe, and now how do we bring them back? And Puerto Rico has perhaps one of the strongest STEM educational systems in anywhere in the United States. In fact, a lot of people don't realize that Nassau, the #1 university that Nassau recruits from, is the University of Maya West, what they call RUM, R-U-M. More graduates are recruited from RUM by Nassau than any other university in the United States. So the talent pool in Puerto Rico is there. It's really just a question of, how do we, build off of that? How do we keep the young Puerto Ricans to stay on the island? And even if they want to go, and I think it's a really good idea, like you did, go to Europe, learn another language, learn what another culture is, but come back and bring that to Puerto Rico, because that knowledge is so important. You to travel and then come back, did that, how did that help you shape kind of your understanding of the island?
There is a level of development that I cannot verbalize that comes from leaving your country, living somewhere else for a period of time. I'm telling you, I always say, I stopped searching for the country of my dreams and I decided to create it.
Mm.
Because it was a never-ending search, right?
Can you
So
say
I
that again?
had the
Can you say that again? Because that was just really
yeah,
important.
of course.
You
Yeah, I decided to stop searching for the country of my dreams and I decided to create it. And so I left, and that gave me a huge perspective. I mean, because I was always a problem solver, and I went to countries that had tended to the problems that I was looking to solve in my country. So Monaco, for example, is 100% renewable energy. France has a great transportation system, great health system, great social benefits. And yet, the happiness that I was looking for, I didn't find it there. I didn't, there was something that was off. And then I came back to Puerto Rico where everything was a mess and I was overjoyed and excited to be here. And so it put things in perspective. I didn't put like, I got my priorities in order, and I was able to realize that my life was not going to be about me searching for my personal fulfillment and happiness. It was about giving other people the experiences that I've had. Because if you live outside of Puerto Rico, like you mentioned in page 149, educational travel grants should be allocated to study abroad. Like gap years and junior year abroad programs, the local government should facilitate learning new languages, technical capacities, and cultural insights. Puerto Rico should provide these incentives in exchange for on-island work requirements. So what you're describing there is what I got. So I got to learn a new language. I got to go to a new country, and that experience is invaluable, and especially when you bring it back to the island, because you also approach problems with a greater amount of peace. Because look, in France they have similar problems, they're just in French. In the United States they have similar problems, but they're in English. And so it's like, you're gonna have these problems in life. You're never gonna find Eden, but you can choose to have them with your people, with your family, in your country, and hash them out like we are right now.
That was kind of part of my motivation of writing the book, was I didn't want people to think that there's only one way to do things in Puerto Rico. And so Why Puerto Rico Now really provides a lot of different solutions. I hope some of them will come to fruition. And even those that don't, I just want people to start to think about, maybe think going outside of the box, whether it's traveling or reading or just speaking to people who are different. It's really about that, and so I'm happy that that connected with you in the book.
I want everybody to read this book too, because I want us all to get together on a round table and discuss why Puerto Rico now? So I want these people to come back now, right? I would love to read the headline in a few years, but I want people to start thinking about relocating, about putting hands on deck, about básicamente aprovechar to make the most of these opportunities, because if we don't, somebody else will. And that's why there's a sense of urgency for me. If we don't take care of these market gaps, if we don't address the future of sustainability, and that's what brought me back, Adam, that thing brought me back. If we don't do it, who will? So if I leave my country and I come back in 30 years, who am I leaving it to? Like, who's gonna be in charge of the decision making? Who's gonna be a pioneer? Who's gonna make educational travel grants? If not me, if not us, right? So there's a sense of urgency of why Puerto Rico now, right now.
Yeah, all right. Well, I think we're going to end on that note. That just really made my day. And Patricia, thank you so much. I look forward to continuing to talk about why Puerto Rico now. Thank you.
Me too. Thank you, Adam.